Welcome to Cozy Sleep Haven. Wind down, snuggle up, and let's get cozy. Tonight's episode invites you to join Grace, Havenport's soothing meditation guide and lover of slow, intentional living, for a retreat into the heart of the cozy woods. We'll begin in a charming woodland cabin at the golden hour, its rustic charm bathed in the warm hues of twilight. Inside, a gathering of women shares an evening of creativity, companionship, and connection. Grace begins with a soothing meditation, setting the tone for a night dedicated to the quiet joy of crafting. As the fire crackles in the hearth and the forest whispers just beyond the cabin walls, we'll settle into a rhythm of needlepoint, quilting, and crochet. Each stitch, loop, and seam carries the weight of tradition and the gentle magic of creation, offering a moment to pause, reflect, and find peace in the present. The cabin's atmosphere hums with warmth, the soft glow of the firelight, the scent of chamomile tea steeping in the corner, and the gentle rustle of fabric as the women lose themselves in their crafts. Outside, the forest begins its quiet symphony, the night enveloping the cabin in its tranquil embrace. Here at Cozy Sleep Haven, we treasure these simple moments of connection, the meditative rhythm of a needle through fabric, the comfort of shared stories, and the peace of being fully present. We hope you'll take a moment to subscribe and join us often for more cozy tales and restful stories from Havenport. For now, let's begin this evening of stillness and creativity and listen in as Grace leads us in a soothing meditation at the cabin. The cabin was bathed in a golden glow, the last rays of sunlight filtering through the tall pines outside and casting dappled patterns on the rustic wooden walls. Inside, a group of women sat in a loose circle on soft cushions and armchairs, their hands resting lightly on their laps. The crackling fire in the stone hearth filled the space with gentle warmth, and the scent of cedar mingled with hints of lavender from a softly burning candle nearby. Grace's voice carried through the room, low and soothing. "Let's begin by finding stillness," she said, her tone inviting calm. "Close your eyes, if you'd like, and take a slow, deep breath in. And let it out, releasing the tension in your shoulders." The women followed her lead, their breathing soft and steady, the room growing quieter with each exhale. Grace continued, her voice weaving through the space like a warm thread. Feel your body settle into the chair or cushion beneath you. Let your shoulders relax, your jaw unclench. Imagine the cabin wrapping you in its cozy embrace, a safe and comforting haven. The sound of the fire provided a rhythmic backdrop as Grace guided them further into relaxation. Picture yourself surrounded by this peaceful forest, the tall trees swaying gently in the evening breeze. The golden hour bathes everything in warm light, and you feel completely at ease. Each breath you take carries in the fresh, earthy scent of pine, filling your lungs with calm. She paused, allowing the image to settle in their minds. Now imagine your hands holding a simple, beautiful craft, maybe a needlepoint hoop, a crochet hook, or a quilt square. With each stitch, each loop, you find a sense of rhythm and flow, There's no rush, no expectation. Just the quiet joy of creating something with care and intention. The women's breathing had slowed into a shared rhythm, their faces softening with the peace of the moment. Grace's gaze moved around the room, taking in the serene expressions of her companions. As we bring this meditation to a close, carry this sense of calm into the evening ahead. Know that the creativity you hold in your hands is a reflection of the calm within you. With a final deep breath, the group began to stir, opening their eyes and smiling gently at one another. The energy in the room was warm and light, like the soft glow of the fire. The faint rustle of fabric broke the stillness as one of the women adjusted her chair, a smile tugging at her lips. "That was perfect, Grace," she said softly. "I feel like I could sit here forever." Grace returned the smile, her heart swelling with the joy of seeing her friends at ease. "Then let's stay a while," she said, her voice gentle. "The evening is ours." The women began to shift, reaching for their crafting supplies as the light outside faded into twilight. The crackle of the fire and the murmur of quiet conversation filled the space, setting the stage for an evening of creativity and connection. The cabin seemed to glow with an energy all its own, as though it, too, was embracing the moment. The room came alive with the gentle rustle of fabric, the clinking of needles, and the quiet hum of conversation. Each woman settled into her own chosen craft, their movements deliberate, yet unhurried, as if time had slowed to match the tranquil rhythm of the cabin. To Grace's left, a woman named Margaret worked on a vibrant quilt square, her needle flashing in the firelight as it dipped in and out of the fabric. The square in her lap was a mosaic of deep greens and golden yellows, mirroring the pine trees and sunlight just beyond the cabin walls. Margaret's brow furrowed slightly in concentration, but her smile betrayed the joy she felt in the steady, familiar motions. Across the room, Anna, the youngest of the group, had chosen crochet. She sat cross-legged on a plush cushion near the hearth, her hands moving deftly as a delicate scarf began to take shape. The soft lavender yarn trailed from her lap like a gentle waterfall, pooling on the rug beneath her. Every so often, she paused to admire her progress, her expression one of quiet pride. Beside her, Eleanor, an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair neatly pinned, worked on a piece of embroidery. Her pattern was intricate, a blooming garden of roses and daisies that seemed to grow with every stitch. Eleanor's hands moved with practiced grace, and her soft murmurs to herself were just audible over the crackling fire. Grace took it all in, her heart swelling with gratitude for this moment, this community of women who had come together to create. She reached for her own project, a needlepoint design featuring wildflowers in shades of pink, blue, and gold. As she prepared her thread, she let her thoughts wander, reflecting on the unique energy that filled the cabin. There was something magical about crafting together, she thought, a kind of unspoken connection that bound them all. Each woman brought her own story, her own hands, her own rhythm to the circle, yet they moved in harmony, their collective presence creating a space of warmth and inspiration. The conversation ebbed and flowed, punctuated by soft laughter and quiet moments of focus.
"Eleanor, your roses are stunning,"
Anna said, her voice tinged with admiration as she leaned over to take a closer look. Eleanor glanced up with a warm smile. "Thank you, dear. I've been working on this pattern for years, off and on. It's my favorite one to revisit when I need a little peace." Margaret chimed in from her corner, her needle pausing mid-stitch. "That's the beauty of these crafts, isn't it? They're always there waiting for you when you need them." Grace nodded in agreement, threading her needle with a soft blue thread. "It's like they hold a space for us, reminding us to slow down and find joy in the little things." The room fell quiet again, the women absorbed in their work. Outside, the forest darkened as twilight deepened, but inside, the cabin glowed with warmth and light. The atmosphere was one of calm and connection. A sanctuary where creativity and companionship could flourish. Grace let out a contented sigh as she began her first stitch, feeling utterly at peace. The cabin seemed to hum with life as the women worked, their quiet focus infusing the space with a sense of calm purpose. Grace paused her needlepoint for a moment, letting her eyes wander around the room. The glow of the fire flickered softly on the wooden walls, casting golden light over the simple but inviting furnishings. The atmosphere felt timeless, as though this space existed outside the rush of the world beyond the forest. A small clock on the mantel ticked rhythmically, its steady beat blending with the faint rustle of fabric and the occasional murmur of conversation. The shelves lining the walls were a treasure trove of creativity, filled with neatly stacked books, glass jars brimming with colorful threads, and small trinkets that seemed to whisper their own stories. Grace rose from her seat, her quilt falling in a soft heap onto the armchair. She walked over to one of the shelves, her fingers brushing the spines of books. Titles on slow living, crafting techniques, and herbal remedies lined the wooden planks, their worn covers a testament to years of use. One book caught her eye, a well-loved volume on the history of needlepoint. Its embossed floral design faded but still elegant. She pulled it from the shelf, the weight of it familiar and grounding. As she turned the pages, Grace found herself drawn into the intricate patterns and historical anecdotes, each design a window into another time and place. She thought about how many hands had practiced this craft before her, each stitch a small act of care and attention. The thought brought a quiet sense of connection to her work, a thread linking her to countless others across generations. Nearby, Eleanor noticed Grace's interest. "That's one of my favorites," she said, her voice warm. "I used to sit right here in this cabin, flipping through those pages for inspiration." Grace smiled, setting the book aside. "It's incredible how these patterns carry so much history with them. It feels like they're alive in a way." Eleanor nodded, her silver hair catching the firelight. "They are. Every piece tells a story, whether it's a simple flower or a sprawling scene, and when we work on them, we become part of that story." Grace turned her attention to the crafting nook by the window, The deepening twilight outside added a dreamy quality to the scene, the tall pines silhouetted against the fading purple sky. The table was neatly arranged with embroidery hoops, spools of thread, in every color imaginable, and a small tin of buttons and fabric scraps. It was as though the space had been prepared just for this retreat, a haven for creativity. She selected a floral needlepoint design from the stack, the delicate petals outlined in soft pastels. As she returned to her seat, the warmth of the cabin wrapped around her like an embrace. She threaded her needle with care, settling into the rhythm of her work once more. The cabin's atmosphere seemed to hold its own kind of magic, a gentle energy that encouraged stillness and reflection. As Grace began stitching again, she felt a sense of gratitude for this space and the women who shared it with her. This wasn't just a place to craft, it was a sanctuary, a reminder of the beauty in slowing down and being present. The cabin had settled into a soothing rhythm, the soft sounds of needles threading through fabric, and the occasional murmur of conversation, creating a symphony of calm. Grace set her needlepoint pattern on the table beside her, taking a moment to prepare for the evening ahead. She rose and made her way to the small kitchen nook, where a ceramic teapot sat warming on a trivet. The scent of chamomile and lavender filled the air as she poured the steaming tea into her favorite mug, a simple design with a hand-painted sprig of wildflowers. The warmth seeped into her palms, grounding her in the present moment. Grace smiled to herself, savoring the small ritual of making tea, a simple act that always felt like an invitation to unwind. Returning to her seat by the fire, she set the mug down on a small side table and focused on the needlepoint kit in her lap. The embroidery hoop was polished and smooth, its wood catching the flicker of the firelight. She chose her first thread from a rainbow of colors carefully arranged on a nearby tray. The soft pastels of the floral design, pale pink, sky blue, and gentle green, seemed to reflect the peaceful mood of the evening. Grace threaded her needle with precision, her hands moving with the ease of long practice. She placed the hoop gently on her lap, tracing the delicate outline of the pattern with her fingertips. The anticipation of beginning the first stitch filled her with quiet joy, a sense of purpose that was both calming and invigorating. Around her, the other women were similarly engrossed in their preparations. Margaret had spread her quilt square across her lap, smoothing out the fabric before selecting her next piece of thread. Anna sat cross-legged on the rug, arranging her skeins of yarn in neat rows, the lavender-colored scarf she was working on pooling softly beside her. Eleanor, ever serene, adjusted the frame of her embroidery hoop, her silver needle flashing briefly in the light as she began her next stitch. The fire crackled softly, its warmth radiating through the room. Grace took a sip of her tea, letting the flavors bloom on her tongue. She glanced at the pattern before her, allowing herself to pause and take in the scene. The cabin felt alive with a gentle energy, the kind that only comes from shared focus and quiet camaraderie. She set her mug down and lifted the needle to the fabric, the thread gliding effortlessly through the weave. The first stitch felt like a small but significant beginning, the start of a journey she could lose herself in for hours. Each stitch, she knew, was an act of care and intention, a way of weaving her presence into something tangible and lasting. As Grace worked, She found her breathing slowing, her thoughts quieting. The rhythmic motion of the needle through the fabric became a kind of meditation, her focus narrowing to the small, deliberate movements of her hands. Around her, the women stitched, crocheted, and quilted in harmony, the quiet companionship filling the room with a sense of connection and peace. Outside, the sky deepened into twilight, the forest taking on the hushed stillness of night. Inside the cabin, the light from the fire flickered softly on the walls, casting shadows that danced in time with the gentle movements of the women at work. Grace felt a profound sense of contentment as she continued her needlepoint, the evening stretching out before her like a promise of endless calm. Grace settled deeper into her chair, the quilt draped over her legs providing an extra layer of warmth against the gentle coolness of the evening air. The soft glow of the fire illuminated her needlepoint hoop, the floral design's delicate outline already beginning to take shape with the first few stitches she had placed. She took a steadying breath and threaded the needle again, pulling a strand of pale pink through the fabric with precision. The room hummed with a quiet energy, the women absorbed in their crafts. Margaret adjusted the edges of her quilt square, her fingers deftly aligning the pieces before she pressed her needle through the fabric. Anna, near the hearth, tilted her head in concentration as she worked her crochet hook through the lavender yarn, her movements smooth and methodical. Eleanor's hands moved with the elegance of years of experience, the blooming rose on her embroidery hoop growing more vibrant with each careful stitch. Grace's needlepoint became her focus, the soft resistance of the fabric beneath the needle grounding her in the moment. The repetitive motion of stitching, up through the fabric, down again, felt like its own kind of rhythm, like the ebb and flow of waves on a distant shore. Each pull of the thread created a tiny burst of color, the design coming alive with every stitch she placed. As she worked, Grace's mind wandered, but not in the restless way it sometimes did. Instead, her thoughts flowed gently, like a stream finding its path through a quiet forest. She thought about the women around her and how each brought her own story, her own unique perspective to the group. Margaret's quilt, for instance, was inspired by the landscapes of Havenport, the golden hues of late summer fields stitched into every square. Anna's lavender scarf was meant for her sister, a gift of love and care for someone she cherished deeply. Eleanor's embroidery, intricate and timeless, seemed almost to glow with the years of wisdom imbued in her hands. Grace smiled softly, thinking of how crafting not only brought beauty into the world, but also served as a bridge between people, a way of sharing and connecting that required no words. Her own design, a cluster of wildflowers, carried a memory of long walks through meadows on warm afternoons, moments of simple joy she had stored away to draw upon now. The fire crackled gently, punctuating the soft sounds of needles and threads at work. Grace reached for her tea, her fingers curling around the warm ceramic mug. She took a sip, the herbal notes of chamomile and lavender blending harmoniously and filling her with a deep sense of calm. Setting the mug back down, she returned her attention to the needlepoint, her hands moving instinctively as the design began to blossom before her eyes. Outside, the forest had grown dark, the silhouettes of the trees outlined faintly against the starry sky. The cabin seemed to glow from within, a beacon of warmth and light in the heart of the woods. The women continued their work, the quiet companionship weaving its own kind of magic in the room. Grace glanced up, catching Eleanor's eye. They exchanged a small smile, a silent acknowledgement of the peace they both felt. The night stretched ahead, filled with the promise of uninterrupted time to create, reflect, and simply be. Grace's needlepoint thread pulled taut as she placed another perfect stitch, her heart full of gratitude for this moment, this retreat, and the quiet rhythm of the evening. The cabin's cozy silence was broken occasionally by the gentle murmur of conversation. The women, engrossed in their work, shared snippets of their lives, their voices blending with the soft crackle of the fire. The atmosphere was relaxed, their words flowing naturally, like old friends catching up over a long-awaited evening together. Margaret, still focused on her quilt square, spoke first. "You know," she said, pausing to examine a seam, "my grandmother used to quilt by the fire just like this. She had this big old rocking chair, and she'd hum while she worked. I can still hear it sometimes, even now." Anna looked up from her lavender scarf, her fingers still moving with practiced ease. "That's so lovely, Margaret. Did she teach you how to quilt?" Margaret nodded, a wistful smile on her face. "She did. She used to say that every quilt tells a story, and that it's our job to listen while we stitch. I think about that every time I start a new project." Grace listened, her needlepoint hoop balanced on her lap as her hands moved methodically. "I love that idea," she said. "It's like we're carrying on a conversation with the past, with all the people who came before us and poured their creativity into these crafts." Eleanor, working on her intricate floral embroidery, glanced up with a twinkle in her eye. "It's true. Every stitch holds a memory, a little piece of ourselves. I've kept every piece I've ever made, not because they're perfect, but because they remind me of the moments I spent creating them." Anna smiled softly, her gaze dropping to the scarf she was crocheting. "I think that's why I love making gifts," she said. "It feels like I'm giving someone a part of myself, something they can hold on to when they need it." The room grew quiet again as the women returned to their work, the weight of their words settling comfortably in the space. Grace's thoughts wandered as she stitched, reflecting on how crafting had always been a source of solace for her. It wasn't just about the finished product. It was about the process, the meditative rhythm that allowed her to quiet her mind and connect with something deeper. The fire popped softly, sending a small shower of sparks up the chimney. Grace glanced around the room, her gaze lingering on each of the women. Margaret, so steady and focused, seemed to pour her heart into every seam. Anna's youthful energy brought a lightness to the group, her enthusiasm infectious, and Eleanor, with her quiet wisdom, seemed to embody the timeless beauty of their shared craft. Grace smiled to herself, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for this gathering. It wasn't often that she had the chance to slow down and share this kind of connection with others. The cabin, with its warm glow and welcoming energy, felt like the perfect place for this moment, a sanctuary where they could all come together, create, and simply be. As the evening deepened, the conversation ebbed and flowed, weaving its own thread through the fabric of the night. Each story shared, each laugh exchanged, added to the warmth of the room, wrapping them all in a cocoon of companionship and creativity. As the women continued their crafts, the soft rhythm of needles passing through fabric and yarn created a soothing cadence that filled the cabin. Grace found her thoughts drifting, her hands steady as she worked on the delicate petals of her floral design. The meditative repetition of needlepoint often led her mind to wander in the most peaceful ways, and tonight was no exception. She glanced at her companions, their faces serene and focused, and spoke softly, her voice blending seamlessly with the quiet atmosphere. "Did you know that needlepoint has been around for centuries?" she asked, her eyes flickering between the women. "It's one of the oldest forms of decorative art." Margaret, who had paused to smooth out the edges of her quilt square, raised an eyebrow with interest. "Really? I didn't realize it went back that far." Grace nodded, threading her needle again. "It dates back to ancient Egypt, actually. Some of the earliest pieces were found in the tombs of pharaohs. Small, intricate designs stitched onto clothing and decorative items. It's incredible to think about how long this craft has been passed down." Anna, who had set aside her scarf momentarily to sip her tea, leaned in slightly. "I love that," she said. "It makes me feel like we're part of something bigger, like we're connected to all the people who've done this before us." Eleanor smiled knowingly, her fingers still moving deftly over her embroidery hoop. "There's a kind of timelessness to it, isn't there?" she said. "Every piece we create is like adding a new thread to a tapestry that's been woven over generations." Grace continued, her voice taking on a thoughtful tone. "And it's not just the history that's fascinating. It's how needlepoint has been used to tell stories, to capture moments in time. In the 17th and 18th centuries, women would stitch samplers that included everything from family trees to quotes and personal reflections. It was a way to preserve their voices, their experiences." Margaret smiled as she resumed her stitching. "I guess that's why they call it storytelling through stitches. It's such a beautiful way to leave a little piece of yourself behind." The group fell into a comfortable silence, the weight of their conversation settling gently over the room. Grace's thoughts lingered on the idea of connection, how this seemingly simple craft was, in reality, a bridge across time, linking them to countless others who had found joy and solace in the same repetitive motion of needle through fabric. She looked down at her needlepoint hoop, the floral design beginning to bloom under her hands. The vibrant colors of the thread seemed to carry a new significance, each stitch a tiny contribution to a legacy far greater than herself. It was humbling and comforting all at once. Outside, the forest had grown still, the darkness of the night broken only by the faint glow of the stars above. Inside the cabin, the fire continued its steady crackle, its warmth a gentle reminder of the sanctuary they had created together. Grace smiled to herself as she added another stitch, her heart full of gratitude for the timeless beauty of the evening. The cabin had grown quieter, the earlier hum of conversation fading into a peaceful stillness. The women, absorbed in their crafts, seemed to move in unison, their focus creating a collective sense of calm. The soft hiss of the fire and the rhythmic tick of the clock on the mantel were the only sounds, blending harmoniously with the occasional rustle of fabric and thread. Grace felt her breathing slow as she sank deeper into her work. The floral needlepoint design in her lap was beginning to take shape, the petals blooming in vibrant shades of pink and blue, framed by soft green leaves. Her hands moved methodically, each stitch precise and deliberate, the thread gliding smoothly through the fabric. The repetitive motion became a meditation in itself, her thoughts clearing until only the present moment remained. Around her, the women were similarly engrossed. Margaret's quilt square had grown into a patchwork of rich, earthy tones, her needle darting expertly through the seams. Anna's lavender scarf draped over her lap, the delicate rows of stitches a testament to her patience and care. Eleanor's embroidery was nearly complete, the intricate garden scene she had been working on glowing in the firelight. Grace paused to stretch her fingers, her gaze drifting to the window. The forest outside was cloaked in darkness, the silhouettes of the tall pines barely visible against the starry sky. The cabin felt like a world unto itself, its warm glow a refuge from the vast stillness beyond. She smiled softly, her heart swelling with gratitude for this moment of peace and connection. Returning to her needlepoint, Grace lost herself once more in the rhythm of the stitches. The act of creating something with her hands brought a quiet joy, a sense of accomplishment that wasn't tied to deadlines or expectations. It was a reminder of the simple pleasures that often went unnoticed in the rush of daily life. The fire crackled softly, sending a wave of warmth through the room. Grace glanced at the women around her, their faces serene and focused. She felt a deep sense of connection to them, to the shared energy of the evening. In this small cabin, surrounded by the quiet beauty of their crafts, they had created a sanctuary of stillness and creativity. As the minutes passed, the cabin seemed to breathe with them, its cozy atmosphere embracing their presence. Grace let out a contented sigh, her needle poised for the next stitch. The night stretched ahead, filled with the promise of more quiet moments like this. Moments where the world felt perfectly aligned, where everything else faded away, except for the simple act of creation. The peaceful rhythm of the evening was gently interrupted as Margaret let out a satisfied sigh, holding up her quilt square for the group to see. The rich tones of green and gold shimmered softly in the firelight, the edges perfectly aligned. "What do you think?" she asked, a note of pride in her voice. Anna leaned forward from her spot on the rug, her lavender yarn pooling around her feet. "It's beautiful, Margaret," she said, her tone genuinely admiring. "I love how the colors remind me of the forest outside.
It feels like you captured the spirit of this place."
Eleanor, with her signature grace, set her embroidery hoop aside and adjusted her glasses to get a better look. "You've outdone yourself," she said warmly. "It's so balanced and calming. I can almost feel the sunlight filtering through the trees when I look at it." Margaret smiled, her cheeks tinged with a modest flush. "Thank you. I wasn't sure about the gold at first, but I think it adds just the right touch of warmth." Encouraged by the moment, Anna held up her scarf, the soft lavender yarn now forming a series of delicate, even rows. "I'm finally getting the hang of this pattern," she said with a grin. "It took a few tries, but I think it's starting to look like something my sister will actually wear." Grace reached out to touch the edge of the scarf, her fingers brushing the soft texture. "It's lovely, Anna," she said, her voice gentle. "The stitches are so even. Your sister's going to treasure it,
Not just for how it looks, but for the love you put into making it."
Eleanor lifted her embroidery hoop, turning it slightly so the others could see her nearly finished garden scene. Roses and daisies bloomed in vibrant threads, the colors blending seamlessly to create a lifelike effect. The group let out a collective murmur of admiration, their eyes drawn to the intricate details.
"It's incredible," Grace said, her voice filled with awe. "Your work always feels so alive, Eleanor. It's like I can almost smell the flowers."
Eleanor chuckled softly, the sound rich with affection. "Thank you, Grace. This pattern has been a labor of love for years. It's always been my favorite to return to when I need a little peace." Encouraged by their openness, Grace turned her needlepoint hoop slightly, revealing the wildflowers she had been working on. The petals in soft pinks and blues were beginning to take shape, framed by delicate green leaves.
"I still have a ways to go," she said modestly, "but I'm happy with how it's coming together."
The group leaned in, their expressions filled with warmth. "It's beautiful, Grace," Margaret said. "The colors are so soft and inviting. It makes me think of summer meadows."
Anna nodded enthusiastically. "You have such a light touch with your stitching. It looks so effortless."
The women shared smiles, their words of encouragement weaving an invisible thread of connection between them. In this moment, it wasn't just their crafts that were coming together. It was their spirits, their stories, their shared sense of purpose. As they returned to their work, the cabin seemed to glow a little brighter, the fire's warmth mirroring the camaraderie of the group. The air was filled with quiet laughter and soft murmurs, the joy of creation palpable in the cozy lantern-lit space. Grace glanced around the room, her heart full as she stitched another flower, feeling utterly at peace. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, its golden glow dancing across the cabin walls as the women worked steadily on their projects. The earlier buzz of conversation had settled into a reflective quiet, the kind that came naturally after an evening of shared creativity and companionship. Grace paused her needlepoint for a moment, leaning back in her chair and letting the warmth of the room wash over her. She looked around at her companions, their faces serene and illuminated by the flickering light. Margaret's quilt square was nearly complete, its earthy tones coming together in a harmonious pattern that seemed to capture the essence of the forest outside. Anna, her lavender scarf now an impressive length, hummed softly to herself as her crochet hook moved in a steady rhythm. Eleanor's embroidery glowed with the vibrancy of her blooming garden design, each flower a masterpiece in its own right. Grace's gaze shifted to her own work, the cluster of wildflowers she had been stitching steadily throughout the evening. The petals were soft and delicate, the colors blending together in a way that felt alive and organic. She ran her fingers lightly over the fabric, the texture grounding her in the moment. "This has been such a lovely evening," Grace said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was warm and filled with gratitude. "It's not often that we get to slow down like this, to just be." Margaret looked up from her quilt, her smile gentle. "You're right," she said. "There's something about this cabin, about being here together, that makes it easier to let go of everything else." Anna nodded, her youthful energy softened by the peaceful atmosphere. "It's like the world outside doesn't exist for a little while. Just us, our crafts, and this cozy space." Eleanor, always thoughtful, set her embroidery hoop on her lap and folded her hands. "It's a reminder, isn't it, that we need to make time for this, for the things that fill our hearts and connect us to each other." Grace smiled, her heart swelling with the truth of Eleanor's words. "Crafting has always been that for me, a way to slow down, to be present, but doing it together like this, it's something else entirely. It's magic. The women shared a quiet laugh, their eyes sparkling with the shared understanding of that word, magic. It wasn't the kind that came with fanfare or spectacle. It was the kind that crept in gently, in the glow of a fire, the rhythm of a needle, and the warmth of kindred spirits. Outside, the forest was still, the stars above twinkling in a clear moonlit sky. Inside, the cabin seemed to hum with its own quiet energy, a sanctuary of creativity and connection. Grace closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the fire and the soft rustle of fabric envelop her. "I think I'll remember this night for a long time," Anna said softly, her voice carrying a hint of wonder. "It feels like something special, like we're creating more than just stitches and patterns." Grace opened her eyes, her smile gentle. "We are," she said. "We're creating memories, ones we can carry with us long after we finish these projects." The room grew quiet again, the women returning to their work with a renewed sense of purpose. The night stretched on, filled with the promise of more shared moments and the peaceful rhythm of their crafts. Grace picked up her needle once more, her heart full, her stitches steady, and her spirit at ease. As the evening deepened, the cozy cabin began to shift from a space of activity to one of quiet preparation for rest. The fire, now burning low, cast a softer golden light that flickered gently on the walls. Grace set her needlepoint hoop aside, the floral design nearly complete, and stretched her arms, a peaceful sigh escaping her lips. Margaret folded her quilt square neatly, smoothing the edges with care. "I think I'll save the finishing touches for tomorrow," she said, her voice warm but tinged with the comfortable weariness of a fulfilling evening. "This has been such a perfect night." Anna nodded in agreement, setting down her crochet hook and admiring the length of her lavender scarf. "I didn't realize how much I needed this," she said softly. "It feels good to slow down, to just focus on something simple." Eleanor placed her embroidery hoop carefully on a nearby table, her hands lingering for a moment on the intricate garden scene she had been crafting. "There's a certain peace that comes with these moments," she said, her voice filled with quiet wisdom. "We should always make time for them." Grace smiled at her companions, her heart full as she moved to the small kitchen nook. She retrieved a tin of herbal tea and prepared a pot, the scent of chamomile and mint wafting through the cabin as the water boiled. The sound of the tea being poured into mugs was soothing in its own way, a gentle punctuation to the evening's rhythm. She carried the tray of mugs to the group, the warm ceramic cups passed hand to hand. "A little tea to wind down," Grace offered, her voice soft and inviting. The women gathered near the hearth, settling into the cozy armchairs and cushions that had cradled them throughout the evening. Each sip of tea brought a sense of warmth and calm, a perfect end to the hours spent creating and connecting. Margaret pulled a quilt from a nearby basket, draping it over her legs as she leaned back in her chair. Anna tucked her feet beneath her on the rug, the lavender scarf draped around her shoulders like a comforting embrace. Eleanor, always poised, folded her hands over her lap, her expression serene as she gazed into the flickering embers of the fire. Grace, too, found her place, wrapping herself in a soft shawl and letting the warmth of the room settle over her. "I think this cabin has its own kind of magic," she said softly, her words more a reflection than a statement.
It feels like it was meant for nights like this.
The others murmured in agreement, their voices low and contented. The fire crackled softly, its glow a gentle reminder of the time they had shared. The sounds of the forest outside, an occasional rustle of leaves, the faint call of an owl, blended with the peaceful ambiance of the cabin, creating a cocoon of stillness. The group fell into a companionable silence, each woman lost in her own thoughts, yet comforted by the presence of the others. Grace closed her eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm of the evening wash over her, the sense of connection and calm filling her with gratitude. As the fire burned lower, the cabin seemed to exhale with them, its warmth and energy a quiet promise of rest and renewal. The crafts they had worked on sat neatly folded or placed to the side, waiting for the next day's light to bring them back to life. For now, the night was theirs to savor, the peace of the moment, a gift they would carry long after the retreat ended. The fire in the hearth had faded to a soft glow, its last embers casting flickering shadows on the cabin walls. The room was steeped in warmth and stillness, the peaceful energy of the evening lingering like a gentle embrace. Grace sat nestled in a deep armchair by the window, a soft quilt wrapped around her shoulders. The rhythmic sound of her breathing matched the quiet hush of the forest outside. The other women had retired to their rooms, their whispers and soft footsteps fading into the wooden beams of the cabin. The crafted pieces they'd worked on throughout the evening were left behind, resting on tables and chairs like quiet reminders of their time together. The cabin, though quieter now, still held the echoes of their laughter, their stories, and the soothing rhythm of their shared creativity. Grace let her gaze drift to the window, where the sky beyond the trees was awash with stars. The silvery light bathed the forest in a serene glow, and the gentle sway of the branches seemed to mirror the slow, calming rhythm of the night. She felt her shoulders relax further as she sank into the embrace of the quilt, the fabric soft against her skin. Her needlepoint hoop rested on the table beside her, the vibrant floral design a nearly completed masterpiece. She reached out to run her fingers over the threads, her touch light, as if tracing the memory of the stitches she had so lovingly placed. The project would wait for tomorrow, but for now, it brought her a quiet sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. Grace closed her eyes, the soothing sounds of the cabin filling her senses, the faint crackle of the fire's dying embers, the rustle of the trees outside, and the soft creaks of the cabin settling into the stillness of the night. Her thoughts wandered briefly to the women who had shared this retreat with her, their smiles, their stories, the quiet strength of their presence. It felt like a gift, this time spent together, and she carried the gratitude for it deep within her heart. She let out a long, contented sigh, her body sinking further into the chair. The weight of the day melted away as her mind softened, her thoughts drifting like leaves on a gentle breeze. The image of her wildflower needlepoint floated in her mind, its delicate petals and vibrant colors, a symbol of the calm and connection she had found tonight. Outside, the forest was alive with the subtle sounds of nature, the rustle of leaves, the occasional call of an owl, and the faint whisper of the wind weaving through the trees. The cabin seemed to hum in harmony with these sounds, its warmth and safety a sanctuary against the vastness of the night. Grace felt sleep begin to claim her, her breathing deep and steady. She let herself surrender to the peace of the moment, her body and mind cradled by the magic of the cabin and the comforting presence of the forest beyond. In this small, quiet corner of the world, everything felt perfectly aligned, as though the night itself had conspired to bring her this perfect stillness. The final ember in the hearth flickered one last time before dimming into darkness. The cabin rested, its glow now only in the hearts of those who had shared its warmth. Grace drifted into sleep, her dreams woven with threads of joy, creativity, and the quiet beauty of the evening. The stars outside twinkled softly, their light a gentle promise of peace until the morning came.